to avoid it because, well, you don't want to go to court. You don't know even if you win whether you're going to be able to collect.
Right.
And right now, like I said, we're Victim of Crime Act funded. And VOCA funds are getting cut. So it's already hard to get attorneys to represent people in civil cases or in the criminal cases now. And we're talking about some agencies are, may not exist like mine. Others are gonna get a cut of up to 80% of their budgets are gonna be cut. So it's tight now, it's gonna be possibly much worse over the next 3 years. So, you're familiar with the group. Oh, we're being taped though, so I need to go through it. My name's Sonia Commissar. I can't just talk to you, Carolyn. My name's Sonia Commissar. I am the Victim Service Attorney and Project Director for the Coalition of Wisconsin Aging and Health Group's Elder Financial Empowerment Project. This is our mission statement as it now stands. This has evolved over the last 2 years since I came on as the Victim Service Attorney in February 2022. I became Project Director in May of 2023. And as of June 1st of this year, I finally got complete control over the project. And so we are hoping that going forward, should we get our grant renewed, that we will continue to evolve our services to meet changes in the landscape that come about because of the Victim of Crime Act funds that are being cut for other agencies that provide services statewide. The reason that we're doing it is because an elder adult at risk, by definition, is really broad. So it's anyone who has experienced, is currently experiencing, or is at risk of experiencing abuse. Well, I think almost everybody's at risk at this point, given the calls I've gotten this week. And we got an aging population in the state. 25.9% of the state's over 60. Some counties are over 30% over the age of 65. Vilas County is the oldest at 33.7% of its residents are over 65. So the instruments most commonly used to get people's property are financial powers of attorney and quitclaim deeds.
Right.
Most people are familiar with what is a financial power of attorney. And they're an almost necessary document these days because these forms survive in capacity. You will not need a guardianship. If something happens to you and you're not able to act on your own behalf, this person can continue to deal with your finances and take care of your housing and your bills so that you do not need a guardianship. If something happens and you lack capacity without the document, there's no one that has authority to do certain things for you and you need a guardianship to take care of it. However, they can be abused. So a fiduciary is anybody that is named to manage your money. But they have legal responsibilities, they have legal duties that are punishable, and that's why we want them instead of informal agreements. Plus, they're respected by institutions. Types of fiduciaries are trustees, representative payees are VA fiduciaries, guardians or conservators, agents of financial power of attorney. Now, there's certain precautions that can be taken because you do give broad authority when you have a financial power of attorney to do transactions, to make them less susceptible to abuse. You picked up, there's documents here, people can request them by emailing me, accounting forms and inventory forms, and they absolutely should be done to make sure that people know what property exists at the time this person was assigned. You should not just execute a document and then never touch it again because circumstances change. Your agent could become addicted to drugs, they could develop a mental illness, they could move away, they could find themselves in the middle of a divorce and a bankruptcy and not be able to manage your money or might be more tempted to give themselves a little financial relief. So you need to review them because circumstances change. Agents pass away, predecease the principal. Then you only have one person on as an agent. Something happens to them or they become abusive, you don't have anybody on your piece of paper anymore if you revoke them and now your document's worthless. You can require 2 signatures for large transactions. I'd absolutely include this. And you can grant the power to revoke it to a trusted third party. And the reason for that is if somebody becomes incapacitated and that POA, that agent, is abusive, if you do not have capacity, you cannot revoke. You cannot execute a new document. You need the third party can't name a new agent, but they can revoke a misbehaving one. So there's lots of things you can do. Part of the problem with the fill-in-the-blank state forms is that this is the section that you initial, granting somebody the authority to act in regards to your real property, your stocks and bonds, civil litigation. But it doesn't explain. You simply initial, if you want to know what that power is, you have to page back to the appendix. Most people don't page back because you have your signatures and your witnesses before the appendix. I don't page back unless I need to if I don't understand anything, and the problem is people think they understand and they don't. Special instructions, those provisions from the previous 2 slides ago where it said require an accounting. You would have to write this in. The fill-in-the-blank state form does not have a box to initial stating you want an accounting. You have to write it in, that an inventory was done and that you want an accounting to be done every year and given to. To request 2 signatures or require 2 signatures to be necessary for large transactions. It's a special instruction. You would have to know when you went in to fill this out that those were even options to put in the box. If you've never had the presentation, you've never studied up on it, people just leave it blank or exit out. Now this is what my old forms looked like when I was in private practice. I didn't separate it, personal and family maintenance, and it explains what does that mean. And we would go through those item by item. When you have just that list, people are just initialing and moving on. They take no note and it's not being explained to them. They have to read up on it. And this is my accounting line. And I'm guilty of it. When I was a young new attorney, I just breezed by that. People would say, isn't that just additional paperwork? Yep. Do I need to do it? Nope. Well, I don't want to do it. Then don't. I don't care. I would counsel them much differently now. But I wasn't going to argue with people about the necessity, and I wasn't prepared to do that when I was a brand new attorney. But it's absolutely important, necessary to include it, because it's a very simple concept, right? If you have counted the cookies, you know that after the end of the year, they're going to be counted again, and you're going to have to explain for where the missing cookies went, you're less likely to stick your hands in the cookie jar, right? And so we absolutely want people to do it. It's a precaution for the agent as well. If you name somebody to be your agent in a power of attorney, if they're keeping an accounting, it's going to be harder for someone to accuse them of abusing that power. If there's an accounting, they can just open up the books, right? There's the list up there I think you grabbed on tips. When you're choosing an agent, don't just choose the person that's, your child that lives next door. Because if they can't balance their checkbook, they can't balance yours. They're going to do no better with your finances than their own. If they don't have time, if they don't deal with computers, things like that that make life easier when keeping records, they're not going to keep good records, and they're going to be open to being accused of mismanagement, and they may mismanage, even if it's not deliberate. And the problem with the documents are that, they give broad decision-making authority to somebody else. There's no monitoring. There's no recording of these documents anywhere. It's a private contract. There's a lack of awareness in the risks in granting authority and delayed detection. Oftentimes, without an accounting, the POA doesn't get found out until somebody passes away and they discover the assets are gone. And if you misbehave as an agent, it is a breach of fiduciary duty. It is punishable in a criminal statute. You can sue for it. And self-dealing is sticking your hands in the cookie jar, exceeding the scope, doing more than what is listed on the document, and deviating from the principal's expectations. If you know that the principal has the life, they got estate planning that says what's gonna happen to property, and a POA goes in there and starts selling assets contrary to what they know that principal wants, that's a breach of duty. You can get rid of an abusive agent. You can get rid of somebody just because they moved across the state, you want somebody else, or you discovered something. You can always revoke your agent. But you do then need to fill out, there's a packet there on the table, and people can request it, on how to revoke, because you can't just simply tear it up like you see in the movies. You don't get to just tear up your will, tear up your POA. You can once you've revoked it, when you redraft it, you should look to include protections. If there's an abusive agent, I've had instances where they've done revocations and the agent's like, yeah, I don't care. Well, then you can go in and get a court order. You can get an individual at risk restraining order to stop them from continuing to abuse their authority. And then there's also, you can petition the court for a review of the agent's performance. And you can report it to police, it's a theft. It's plain and simply a theft if you've taken money out that you weren't authorized to take. This is a sample of what the letter is in the packet, because you can't just revoke and say you're not my agent anymore, or even just draft a new power of attorney. You need to give notice to people because you can't get them in trouble for misbehaving or continuing to act if you didn't tell them they don't have the right to act. And you need to do it in writing, because otherwise they can say, I didn't know. You also have to give notice to anyone that's got your power of attorney, such as the bank, because they may continue to work with the previous agent if they don't know. If you give them notice and they continue to operate under the old document, well, then they're liable. So it's not just, it's easy to do, but you do have to follow the steps to protect yourself. And people don't understand that powers of attorney are limited. They terminate upon the death of the principal. So when somebody dies, then it's the personal representative that then has the authority to act. You don't get to continue to act if there's a revocation. So there's a great deal of education that is necessary so that people understand the limits to the authority the document gives. Because there's a whole lot of people that just think they have control and the right to do whatever they want now that they've been named. And we have people that are principals that think that they can't act on their own anymore because they named an agent, and that's not true. Now, if somebody lacks capacity and they have an abusive agent, that's why it's very important that you have documents that name other people, and if you revoke, you redraft so that there's still 2 agents listed, because otherwise, if there's nobody left, once somebody loses capacity, they can't revoke, and they can't name a new agent. And so then you're in a situation where you need an individual at risk restraining order to be brought on their behalf, and then if there's nobody left to act, you're gonna need a guardianship, and nobody wants to go through the cost, the expense, the time to have the court appoint somebody. So if there's a misbehaving agent and somebody lacks capacity, actions definitely need to be taken. We have a lot of misunderstandings about guardianships because a lot of adult children think that, if mom and dad aren't doing what we want them to do, well, we'll just get a guardianship. If you've got powers of attorney, you don't need one, or you shouldn't need one. And the courts, you're not going to get the Dane County Court, or you're not going to get APS to pick up the cost of doing this if there's somebody else with resources. If there's an estate or people to bring it, they're not going to do it, and they're only going to do it in certain circumstances. So it's not something that can be done on demand. I get lots of calls, or I used to get lots of calls from folks about that subject.
And it takes a long time, there's a long process.
It is a long process, and you got to find a guardian. The guardian's got to take training.
Yeah.
And again, that's a fiduciary role too. The guardians are, and they misbehave too at times. So there's all kinds of precautions that need to be taken. So quitclaim deeds are the other thing that get abused a lot. We get this a lot. It's sad. I do work all around the state, and there's a whole lot land out there with an aging population in this farm country across the state, and there's a lot of people abusing quitclaim deeds. Now, it's not just the destruction of a deed that's signed or stealing the identity. There's a whole lot of the owner signs a deed due to fraud, misrepresentation, or undue influence. And undue influence and misrepresentation comes in when we have adult children that are being asked to move back home in exchange for a quitclaim deed. And then they evict the older owners. I've literally seen eviction actions commence. Property gets sold out from underneath them and they're forced to move. So people really need to understand what they're signing, what's being asked of them, and what they're offering, because oftentimes it's an enticement. They think that this is what they need to do to guarantee that this person will care for them.
Right.
But there's no guarantees. And then I had a gentleman, I just gave this presentation last week, and he goes, oh, I can't believe that. It's like, it happens all the time, because he could not fathom that a child in his family would do that.
Sure, right.
You never can tell. Nobody thought it could happen, or they would never do it.
Right.
So people need to understand what they're trying to achieve with the document and whether that's their best option. Because you could put property into trust, it could be a joint tenancy, a life estate. Maybe instead you need a reverse mortgage to stay in the home, mortgage modifications. Whenever your home's involved, you absolutely need to think about what it is you're trying to achieve. My mom did this. My mom did the same thing. It's like, I'm gonna quitclaim the house to you. With the expectation, she didn't say it, but the expectation is if her health deteriorates, I'll move back and help.
Sure.
But I do this for a living, and so her case, we have a life estate, which means that it's a form of joint tenancy. She can't sell, I can't sell, it requires both signatures. She can't get a mortgage, I can't get a mortgage on the property, it requires both signatures. She is now with the life estate, can live on the property as long as she wants. This is the minimum. It doesn't take anything to do. You just simply create it, you just add a line. Because I looked at it, and I looked at it twice. It's like, that's really all it takes to create this? Yeah, it's not much. But people need to know of its existence. Because if you go into an attorney and you tell him you need X, Y, and Z, he's going to give you X, Y, and Z. Some of the attorneys aren't going to look into more than that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we try to explain things like this, it goes, I don't need this. I trust them entirely. It's like, no, you get it in writing. I don't care who it is, because you never know. There's lots of money out there in real estate.
Right.
I know a gentleman, as soon as he did it, they kicked him out, tried to do an eviction, and put up for sale a huge chunk of the old farm, $500,000 asking price. Lots of money out there, and he had quitclaimed it all to him. Plus, it can screw up your ability to get future services, Medicare clawbacks and the things like that, depending on the timing of your transfers.
Right.
There's a whole lot more involved in this than just signing a quitclaim deed in front of a notary. So people need to become educated on options available before they go in. Reverse mortgages are a way to keep people in their homes, but you got to do it before you fall into trouble with it, because if you've already fallen victim to a scam and your credit's gone and you have no equity, you're not going to be able to do it. But they do say keep people in their homes. But we also have a lot of adult children intervening, and they are looking at it for what's in it for them. So they don't want their parents getting reverse mortgages, because then there's no chance of them inheriting without having to pay. So they oftentimes involve themselves and are advising parents to take certain actions that aren't necessarily beneficial to the older adult, but rather to them and what they think they're going to get out of a sale.
I had a person that was considered for a financial power of attorney, and we talked about the reverse mortgage, and he said, what happens is the bank just buys your home essentially, and he said, I'll buy your home and then you can rent it from me. And like, no, if I can't do that,
Well-
as an elder, I can't stay in my own home then, because I'm a tenant.
Right, so you can do, like, I have one victim of a scam, that one of the options is to sell it to an investment
Oh.
person, I don't remember, I have a mortgage broker guy that has connections, you gotta have a guy. And they buy properties and then you get like a life lease.
Oh.
So it gets written into that deed that they can stay in the property as long as.
Oh, I see.
But they pay rent. Now they're
Yeah.
renters in that home, but they don't own the home. It's sold, it's been transferred to somebody else, purchased. But that would enable this person to live in her home until death, that she has now spent all this, time and money making it handicap accessible. So that was the idea there, because if she loses her housing, she's gonna be looking at low-income housing, and that's not easily accessible in certain
No,
parts of the
right.
state. And, and what Dane County considers affordable is
Oh,
laughable.
no, right.
So,
Yes, you're right.
there's lists, there's waiting lists, there's a shortage. So this was an option, but again, in that particular case, an adult child intervened because they want it sold
Mm.
because they think there's equity. I don't think there's as much equity in it as they think there is. But then where does she go to live?
Where is she gonna live? Yeah.
Well, she could come stay with me, or she could go stay with my brother. Well, that's not a plan.
Yeah.
And I'm a little fearful of what's gonna happen to her after the sale of the property, but that's what she's bent on because she wants them to get something.
Sure. I think that's the worst part of all of this, is that parents are so loving and they're thinking about how they will help their children. And it's so hard to come back and say, well, what do I get out of this? How do I take
Right.
care of myself?
Well, yeah, how do I need to look out for what's best for me in the long term.
Right.
And they don't do that, and they're they're too trusting of. They're very trusting of their adult children,
Oh, yeah.
and I think, well, I shouldn't say it always, but there's always that new significant other that's part of it, their husband or their the husband or the wife, and they have a say in things too that may not line up with, maybe it's not their dream to move back to the old farm homestead in rural middle of Wisconsin. And so, but they'll do it because they see money. And it's as a temporary arrangement.
Right.
So it's, there's a lot of trust the older adults have in their family members, and they should, because there's a lot of dysfunction out there and it goes on for generations and decades, and I hear a whole lot of ugly stuff. And so you really do need to protect your own interest. And like I did, I had to put it in, I forced it on my mother. She was just gonna do a quick claim deed, and I'm like, no, I want this to not have any appearance of.
Right.
Besides the fact I don't live in the house, she does. So it's like, no, you live there, you wanna be able to do X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
You're gonna stay on there, and that. As long as you're physically able to live there, you're gonna be able to live there. But people don't like to do it. They think that that's going to cause a break with the whatever family member, because it's gonna upset them, because they're gonna say, you don't trust me. Well, if you're upset about the precaution, maybe they shouldn't trust you, right?
Right.
Undue influence is the theory where, this is what you see on TV, right? The gold digging new second wife has the will changed. The accusation is undue influence, but for their involvement with that person, they would never have done what they did.
Right.
But it's hard to prove in court.
I
Again,
know.
these are hard concepts. You can know it when you see it. You can see all these tactics playing out. But to prove it in court is much more difficult, because it's a he said, she said.
Right.
Who is the judge going to believe?
Right.
And then, oftentimes, if left unchecked for so long, victims align with their abusers. And when you do go in and make the accusation that this person is exploiting them, they are aligned with the abuser. They will testify on behalf of the abuser. They will swear up and down they meant to do it, they knew what they were doing. Because you got to be cautious when you intervene in these cases. Because if you come on and make them seem like some people don't like, they jump to the idea that you think I'm stupid. You think I can't handle my money, you think I can't live independently, you're trying to put me in a home. They will shut down and they will double down on a bad decision because they don't want to be proven wrong. Or they find it difficult to accept. It's very much like domestic violence cases. They find it very hard to accept that this person that is their family, that they trusted, is doing this and has done this to them. So it's very difficult in some instances to get involved in these cases. We'll have third parties contact us. We'll have other family members. We'll have Adult Protective Services call. But if you've got a victim that is so entwined with their abuser, they won't come to you for help until everything's usually gone and the abuser's taken off because there's nothing left to get. And this can play out in anything. This can play out in the quitclaim deeds. This plays out in financial powers of attorney, in getting people to be named, having their parents name them as the power of attorney, or in them revoking or changing powers of attorney. So this is a concept that plays out in a lot of these cases. Oh, looks like I got that in there twice, huh? I corrected it on one, didn't correct it on this one. And how do we fit in? I think I put up the wrong one. Our agency, as I said, provides financial services to victims 60 years of age and older statewide that have been financially exploited or abused. There's no cost, no income or asset restriction. Services are confidential and we're not a mandatory reporter. CWAIT does not discriminate based on age, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, sexual orientation, disability, medical history, or other non-merit characteristics. And should we receive our grant funding for the next 3 years, we are not in a position where we can do legal representation in court. It took us a while to get that back in place, and now we're on hold because we're not going to start an action that we can't finish. So we are waiting to get the go-ahead, and then we can get to representing people in court. If that happens, because of the cuts in other agencies, we do expect there to be more services and more legal actions that we bring going forward. And it was asked to do the other presentation. They covered other documents that can be used to abuse folks that are fiduciary, include representative payees, as well as trusts and guardianships. Because again, all of these fiduciary duties, because they're a legal obligation, there's a piece of paper that sets forth what they can and can't do, or can do. And if anybody does more than that, it's a breach. But you do need to be mindful of the accountings and keeping good records, because if you don't require it and they don't do it, you're not going to be able to find it until much later. And then that's usually something where assets go missing and then Adult Protective Services gets involved or a police report's made. So fiduciaries include those other instruments, and anything on paper. It's just like a restraining order. Anything you put on paper is just a piece of paper if somebody's not going to abide by it. Mm-hmm. So you do need to be mindful. So because if it goes unchecked, lots of money can disappear, and you just can't assume the resources are going to be there to provide free representation because of the cuts going forward with the Victim of Crime Act grant. It's already tough because they're making tough judgment calls as to whether to bring a case, whether they're going to get compensation, because even if you go through an entire legal process, it can take a year. Same with the DAs. If it's going to take a year, and there's the abuser has left, it's gone through all the money. Even if you win, you're not going to collect restitution. You're not going to necessarily collect on that judgment. So are we going to commit our limited resources to a case that, even if we win, we're going to have nothing to show for it?
Right.
Plus
you know what really scares me right now is our economy, because so many people are feeling pushed to be able to afford their own housing or food or whatever, and you know, if you can take advantage of somebody that's even got a little bit of money, that just, you know, increases what you have in your own pocketbook. And they don't, like, people don't think about getting caught. It's, you know, the whole,
Well-
it's complicated and,
Well, and there's people that do this specifically, that target. The one
Yeah.
problem is, I'm gonna see if I can get to the one slides. They've gotten away with it before because they know that it's hard to track. If you go with them to the bank, or if they write you out a check, or they do a wire transfer, well, there's a paper trail then, right?
yeah, right.
But if you have them go to the bank and take out cash on their own,
Ooh, yeah,
well, now it's harder to prove.
right. And there are ways that you can do 2 signatures on a check or something, work with that,
Mhm.
with your power of attorney. go to the
Right,
bank.
requiring two signatures for a
signatures.
transaction.
Yeah,
But there's the one thing I always like to tell people, it's about perceived need and easy access, right? Proximity to the money of somebody else and a perceived need. It's just the idea that you need it or you could use it for, it's like I could use a trip. Well, and sometimes I'm gonna take that interest-free loan,
uh-huh.
right? That's why you always hear about those attorneys, the estate planning attorneys that get their hand caught in the cookie jar because they have these trust accounts they're handling for people and they just take out an interest-free loan, they're gonna pay it back, but something happens and they can't. Trusts are something that can get abused, like I said,
Yeah.
and they get exploited when somebody gets, through undue influence, misrepresentation, coercion, to draft one, request one. Part of the biggest problem we're seeing too right now, and again, I'm not pleased with my attorney colleagues, especially those that provide services to older adults but yet don't look for certain things. My mom needed to transfer assets into her trust. She has a trust set up. They set it up, I think 2 decades ago, 15 years ago or something. She needed to transfer assets into the trust. She does not like working with attorneys. The attorney he's not in her community. He covers a big area because we get to appear, in court via Zoom. A lot of attorneys, you got fewer small attorneys, bigger firms. They cover bigger areas. They're going to talk to you on the phone if you don't have Zoom. This meeting was set up. My mom didn't trust she would understand what he says. She always feels she's going to misunderstand something. So I arranged for the conference call because I have that ability, and I sat on the phone call. So what happened after that? All communications came through my email. All documents came to me because I'm set up for it. Right? I have 2 offices, not even just one. I have an office and I have a home office. I can sign documents on my phone. I have a mobile office. Everything came through me. He never spoke he handed it off to a junior associate, and then all correspondence came through me.
Oh, that's the other thing they do, yeah.
Yeah, because it's easier.
Yes,
But I could have interjected anything I wanted because she's trusting me
Sure,
and he's
right.
not talking to her
right.
to confirm anything.
Oh, boy.
So this happens all the time when you have older populations that aren't sophisticated with the technology that all these offices use, and we want you to have, because our life is so much easier if you're emailing me the information instead of calling me,
Sure,
right? I can look at that any time of the
Whenever
day.
you want,
I don't
right.
have to wait to have time on the phone.
Right.
We want to be able to email you that document for you to sign.
Mhm, mhm.
But there's
Can I ask you
a,
a question?
yeah,
When you talked about older people, they often have visual issues.
exactly.
Like me, I won't do it anymore because my eyes are going.
Right,
See,
because my
we
mom has
know-
hearing, that's why
What?
my mom has a hearing, she can't hear very well. So she doesn't like doing the phone calls by herself.
Oh, yeah.
Because she doesn't trust that she's gonna catch everything said just because of that, even not understanding.
Well, it's about disability. Some
Yes.
people can see, some people can't.
Right.
Some people can hear, some people can't. And when you get old, something goes.
Right, no, and
So
it's a
emails
common.
are- I know that the automation of these wonderful offices are just wonderful for the offices. It's not good for the people.
It's not, but you have to stand up and say, I can't do
I
this."
say it all the time.
Or you gotta-
I just said it 5 times today.
I have no trouble, I don't doubt that.
I say it every time I talk to someone. Do not email, do not text. Call me on the
Right.
phone.
Well, and with my folks, I ask them because a lot of them don't check their email. Some of them just don't use the
So
chat.
don't use it.
So it does me no good to send you an email if you're not gonna see it for 2 months.
Right.
Or if you don't have devices,
I
but
think
so
for
many
old
people
people,
just use
for
their
old
phone.
people, they should not be expected to be technically up to date
No, you
in
should.
order to make offices work better.
Well, it's a
That's
bad,
the whole
it's,
society.
well,
That's
it's
the-
to make it,
Yeah.
well, that gives them a bigger area. But the problem is, then you have to find, it's either deal with these offices, or you gotta find a local guy. And like, when you're talking Preston Estates, not every small community has somebody local to do it.
There is a, by the way, I live in Oregon. Where do you live, or where are you from?
I live in Madison, I've been there for decades now, but I'm originally from West Central Wisconsin.
And what's
So-
the name of your office again?
Got pamphlets up there. I'm the Elder Financial Empowerment Project that is run by the Coalition of Wisconsin Aging and Health Groups.
Okay, I got
So,
it.
so
Thank you
I'm
very
gonna do
much.
that. Yep. So no, it's a big problem in maintaining these offices. The offices, I just had this problem. This is part of my frustration today, was that I referred somebody for litigation to another organization because I'm not doing it. And it's become normalized during COVID for the type of office that she was speaking about, where it's all done virtually. And so now we have people that are hiring offices, they've never met the attorney. When they don't do Zoom, then they are simply talking to a voice, signing a document maybe that got emailed to them, and they're trusting them with all this information. And we've normalized that behavior for all these services, including hiring attorneys, so it makes them easier to fall victim to scammers,
Right.
because this is how we do things now, right? We don't get things in writing. I do that engagement letter that says, this is what I'm doing, and you're giving me permission to do it. That's what you're engaging me to do, because you don't pay me. But I have attorneys that are sending out fee agreements, they're not even meeting with them. They have a phone
Right.
call, they send them out, sign it, return it, and give me $2,000.
Right.
But because of that, I also have people that are supposedly hiring debt consolidation companies that are giving them credit card information, taking out money, and they're not getting any services because there's no service agreement. They didn't
Oh.
sign anything. And so
Huh.
when they're pressured, they forget. But just 4 or 5 years, 5 years ago, you would never have done that. You would have came into the office, sat down,
Right.
and signed a fee agreement. So in my office,
Right.
it's our policy that if I can't see you via Zoom and have that meeting, I'm gonna go to you. So what she was saying is a problem I don't allow for, because I travel to Kenosha.
Sure.
I've traveled up to Whitehall and Trempealeau and Black River Falls
Uh-huh.
and different places, because it was in Eagle River, I think that's the furthest I drove. But if I can't see you and have that meeting via Zoom, I'm gonna meet you in person, because I think that's important, because so many people
That's very
have
important.
gotten way too comfortable with the technology or this idea, or what they think the technology is, that it makes them easy to get scammed.
Right.
And I think that that is important for us as attorneys to not keep perpetuating that idea. But it is easier. It allows for law offices to have smaller staff. You can have virtual staff. I don't even need, there's services that'll do your, you answer your phones, it's a virtual phone. You can do your scheduling online. It allows for them to have an office with maybe one person, a paralegal, but they don't have a receptionist and 2 paralegals assisting them anymore. It's not done that way for some of these folks. These virtual offices allow for them to work from anywhere
Right.
in the state or even out of state. Like my mom's attorney's based in Minneapolis because she's on the border, and they don't have a lot of attorneys. They don't have a lot of service guys, period. We're doing
Right.
work on the basement. She has foundation issues. We're dealing with that. There's like one in Rochester, Minnesota, and one from like Waukesha. So there's all kinds of issues with this type of work. But it needs to be universal, where people go back and remember that. You need to see that person. And I don't care if they say they're a law office. During COVID, we started doing things virtually. We didn't know what we were doing. I never touched Zoom. But we needed to still stay afloat. So we're sending out fee agreements, we're talking to people on the phone, sending it out, email, sign and return with a check.
Wow. Right.
And now
Right,
it's
right,
big,
right.
because scammers got to be a big problem because we've normalized certain behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, easy to take advantage of people, because people don't want to sound stupid, or they don't want to be, you know, demanding. So yes, for everyone like this woman that tells them repeatedly, don't do it, others are going to give up, and they're just going to say, okay, fine. You know, a lot of people won't voice it.